Long story short, I decided not to buy any new lens for my next trip to Europe and just use the kit lens. But I want to go over here why I made that decision, what are the thought process behind this, and hopefully a year from now when I look back, I can say I've made the right decision. So I currently have three lenses, or actually I brought three lenses to my last trip in the States, and they were the 50mm 1.8, which is the Nifty 50, which is the cheap 50mm, and I'll have the 90mm 2.8, which is my best lens. That's a somewhat long zoom lens with wide aperture, and I have the kit lens, which is 28 to 70, 3.5 to 5.6 aperture. And for my next trip, I won't be able to bring as many lenses with me because I have more babies to bring. And so ideally, I would just bring one lens or a maximum of two lenses. And the question is, should I buy a new lens? Some of the options I considered was potentially buying a 24 to 105 Sony f4 or a 24 to 70 2.8, and that could be any, could be Sony, Sigma, or Tamron. And here's why I didn't. So to go back, first what I wanted to see is from my last trip, out of the pictures that I thought was good, how many did I take with each lens and what aperture did I use? So the question is, what in a sort of travel photography where I'm doing a lot of nature portraits, so with some nature and some people in front, and mostly during daylight. Do I really need a wide aperture? Because that changes a lot. That anytime you go below sort of f4, the lens price goes up dramatically. And did I actually use that many f2.8 on my 90mm? And also the other question is, how often do I use the wide angle? So somewhere less than 40mm, for example. And then what are the mediums, like 50mm, and what are the long ones? How many did I take with 90? So let's do that. And what I found out was, well, first we can look at how many was taken with the 90mm lens. So that was 68 pictures out of 168 total. So a lot. The question is, do I like these better at 90? So one of my sort of biggest thing was, now I think I've changed my taste. Looking at this picture here, I feel like maybe a little bit too zoomed in, and I almost like that initial picture I showed you. So again, I'm gonna keep going back to that picture because it just, I think, completely changed how I thought about what looked good. So if I go here, there was only three pictures I took on the kit lens. With the kit lens goes up to 70mm, so anytime between 55 and 89 is not the other lens, because I only have a 90 prime and a 50 prime. So these three are all taken with the kit lens at the 70mm, so the longest range. And I thought this looked good. I mean, you buy expensive lens because, one, of sharpness, two, because the aperture can open wider, so you can get more bokeh. But I mean, look at this picture. I think it's sharp enough for me. It's got enough foreground background separation, and it was taken at f9. F9, like, you don't need, and this was near sunset hour, so it's not super bright either. This is golden hour. So do I use the f2 point? So yeah, going back to, so there's 168 pictures total here, but 168 total. Well, actually, let's narrow it down. So camera maker Sony, there was, make some notes here. So we got 120 photos total that I picked out that was taken on the full frame camera. And out of those, how many were with the long lens? Let's do this. Out of those, 68 were taken with the long lens. But how many of those use the wide aperture? So could I have substituted with kit lens at 70mm? So out of those, if we now do f-stop is less than 3.5. What if I go even smaller? What if it's 3? So okay, so not too much difference. So let's just go 3.5. And out of those, only 17 with wide aperture 90mm lens. So looking at these 17, could I have done it? No, yeah, let's just look through them. This one, exposure time 1/1000. I could easily done with a narrow or smaller aperture and just more exposure. This one too, do I need this much background blur? I don't know. I feel like I don't need to. And there's plenty of exposure time. So, and this picture, do I want that much background blur? Okay, maybe I do. But you know, for these pictures, yeah, so this picture was 1/400. I could probably take in a photo with 1/100 exposure. So, and do I want that much separation? I don't know. So I think I'm okay. If it's just for 17 pictures, I could live without the wide aperture zoom lens. And what about, well, let's look at some other factors. So focal length less than 50. And so all these pictures taken with the kit lens, am I happy with them? I mean, look at this one. This one, f9. I think the foreground background separation is good. And you know, like all these pictures taken with the kit lens, I think plenty sharp enough, honestly. I'm surprised this, no way, this is not kit lens. I think this one just doesn't have the, oh no, never mind. When you arrow, it doesn't just move in the search results. But yeah, like this was taken with a kit lens. And this was so wide open at 28 at the widest focal length. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. I think kit lens will do fine. I mean, we can look at a couple other factors, but instead of looking at just the past photos, I guess another factor is looking at what I want to take in the new location. So what was I trying to search here? I was trying to find okay, yeah, so let's look at what we want to do next. So we're going to Europe, And obviously we'll take some Eiffel Tower, and there's a couple pictures that looks pretty good. And again, comes back to taste. Out of these four, I feel like I like this the most. And this one has the least amount of background separation. I mean, obviously this one was taken with a nicer lens with a big aperture, but I don't know, I like this one better. So the next question is what kind of so obviously we don't need a big wide aperture here. Probably this is like f9. Even this one is, I don't think it's 2.8. This is more like f5, 6, but we don't have to guess. That's the other thing. We can just look it up. And also we can look up the focal length. So I did find a picture. Let's see if I can find it here. There we go. This picture, so if you go to Flickr or 500pixel.com, they oftentimes show you the camera setting that was taken. So this picture, I would say probably a little bit further away. Well, I don't know. I would say these two maybe about the same distance. They're actually all from the same, from the Chocadero Palace. So same distance. And so if you want to get this result, you don't need a long lens. This was taken at 25 millimeters on a 600D. Let's see, is 600D a crop? I want to know. $600D is an APS-C. So what's the Canon crop factor? Is 1.6. So really this was 25. This image was taken with a 40 millimeter full frame equivalent, which is definitely in my kit lens range at f8. So 40 millimeter f8, I can do that with a kit lens. Let's look at some other examples. We want to look at Matterhorn in Switzerland. I think it's Switzerland, yeah. And this image was taken on a D90. What is a D90? Nikon D90. Is it a full frame? Is it a full frame or crop? It has a crop, 1.5 times crop. So the Matterhorn picture was taken with a crop sensor at f4.8. So 48 crop times 1.5. This was taken at 70 millimeter. Again, well within range of my kit lens. 70 millimeter, 4.8. Well, it's not actually 4.8, it's 4.8 times. So it's 70 millimeter f7. And this picture is not great, but I can find some other examples. So that was this picture. I felt like this was too zoomed in. In fact, the picture I liked, which didn't show the settings. Let's see if I can find it. So Matterhorn over Zermatt. I thought there was more. Did I spell it wrong? But yeah, the picture I liked more. Let me just make sure I didn't spell it wrong. Matterhorn Zermatt. Oh, I spelled it wrong. There we go. Yeah, so the picture I liked more was like this. It shows more of the town and the Matterhorn. Now, unfortunately, oh, this one, okay, look. Is there details? Unfortunately, no. This one does not show you the setting. Someone edited on their iPhone, or never mind, iOS. This could be their Mac. But yeah, unfortunately, this one doesn't show you the focal length, but it's definitely wider than the one the one we looked at before. Okay, so again, this one is within the kit range. Last one we want to look at. Oh, I already did Matterhorn over the map. This one, the what's this called? Bakosby Mountain. And let's find a nice one. Like, this is nice. This is at, again, with a crop sensor, so that's 18 times 1.6. 28, exactly. This is taken at 28 full frame equivalent, and like f11 and above. And I think it's nice. So basically, the key sort of point, what do you call them? Scene points or place of interest, whatever you want to call it, can all be covered in my kit lens range without a wide aperture. So, wide aperture didn't come into play that much in my past photos. But yeah, let's do that. F-stop less than 2.9. Let's see how many I took with wide aperture. Just 15 items. Some of them don't even need wide aperture. So for that really changes things. I mean, okay, to be fair, this photo would never be possible if I didn't take my 2.8 90mm lens. But for one photo, is it worth bringing an extra weight and also changing lenses? So finally, I want to close this video with why I'm not buying new lenses. There's the option of 24 to 105 Sony f4, which secondhand is about $1,100 Canadian right now. And the other option will be a 24 to 70 f2.8. That's more like $3,000-$4,000. And number one thing is, if I'm investing more into camera gear, it needs to not only work for this one trip. So the 24 to 105, yes, it would be amazing for this trip. It covers the whole range I need, and f4, I think, now I'm convinced, is enough. But it weighs the same as the 90mm at over 600 grams, and it's an extra $1,000. If I can't use it for future use, like to take kids' sports picture indoors, f4 might not be enough because of the lighting and the action of the sports. So if it doesn't make sense to buy a lens just for this one trip. So first, if I buy another gear, it needs to have utility so that I can make the money back. I've spent about $3,000 so far on camera, $1,000 on the camera, and another $2,000 on the lenses. And for taking my wedding photos, for my previous work helping a association in the city, and they paid me, and for my YouTube earnings from last year, which is about $1,000, I've made it back. So I'm about broken even right now. Buying a new lens, I can't justify it unless I'm making money somewhere as a professional. Number two is what I mentioned earlier. It doesn't make sense to buy a lens just for the sake of one trip. It needs to have utility beyond that one trip. And there's just not much useness for a 105 zoom at f4 besides travel. I don't do a lot of 105 in day to day. Doesn't work for video either. And it definitely doesn't make sense to spend $3,000 for a 2040-70 f2.8 when I'm not professional. I'm not doing this as a job. I'm not taking wedding photos as a job. I thought there was more reason, but that's all I can remember right now. Just those two. But I guess the last one was just how good that kit lens looked. It was, I mean, you don't like a kit lens because, well, let's go back to that one again. You don't like a kit lens because the aperture doesn't open wide enough, and because the sharpness is not as great as the expensive lens. But again, looking at this picture, I'm okay with the sharpness, and it's taken at f9. Do I really need a wider aperture? So that's why. Okay, if you liked it, subscribe. If you have ideas you want to suggest, or if you don't agree with what I'm saying, put down in the comments.